Hello, everybody. Lovely to connect with you. So here we are today. I'm Jacqui. For those of you new tuning in, this is my father, Michael, and philosopher, who's sharing his wisdom with us. We're here today to do session 3 on chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita. But first, I just wanted to share the loveliness and the joy of Dad and I sharing this project with you all. So we've been busy planning this since Christmas 2025 or 2024, beginning of 2025. We've been recording a few podcasts and just starting to amass a few. And then yesterday, we put out our first one. And I have to say, we've had so much beautiful feedback. Dad's had phone calls and messages on his answering machine. There's been beautiful comments on Facebook and YouTube. A few people have been sending me comments and feedback directly. Some of you have been listening and sharing with your friends and your networks. And I have to say, we're just so chuffed. It's certainly for my dad, it's a labor of love. And I too enjoy philosophy and these conversations. But it's just so beautiful to put it out there and to see that people are listening and that you like it and you're sending beautiful and supportive messages. So even though by the time you hear this, you will have perhaps listened to a few more, we just wanted to take a moment just to acknowledge the appreciation that it's a great joy to come together in this way and share with you. We're thrilled and chuffed. My dad is having a moment of realizing, like a crash course in social media and how that works. Remember, this is a yeah.
That's for sure, Jacqui.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy.
Oh, remember, everyone, this is a man that, prior to Christmas has never turned on a computer in his life. No email, no social media. So when we put it out there yesterday and people comment, and then I share with Dad, so and so commented, and he's like, but she's in Queensland. How would she comment? I'm like, welcome to the world and the power of social media. Doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you're interested and you want to tune in, location and geographical distance is of no concern whatsoever. So anyway, from our hearts to yours, we're grateful to share this bit of the journey with you. We hope that all of these teachings are useful. We're having a lot of fun putting these together. So with that being said, thank you. And over to you, Michael.
Oh boy, that's a hard act to follow, Jacqui. Beautifully spoken, as I would expect of you. And I'll share Jackie's comments wholeheartedly. It's been a huge experience for me yesterday, I can tell you. But I've had a little bit of time to recover, so I think I'll be able to continue on today's session. So, well said, Jacqui. I'm sure our listeners will relate to your comments. Yeah. All right. Well, hello to you, and a big cheerio to all our listeners, Jacqui. So you've already mentioned that this podcast, the third of the of chapter 2, will conclude chapter 2 when we finish today. So I'll just simply continue on, Jacqui, from where we left off last week when we were discussing, if the listeners remember, and just to remind them, that Krishna was teaching Arjuna about the continuous life cycles that might be new, relatively new or totally new to a lot of our listeners, and also the dual nature of man. And I explained that in detail with a sheet I read out from the mystics that told us about the dual nature, which in essence, or summarised, simply means we've got a mortal aspect that everyone identifies with, the body, the mind, the emotions, the senses, the ego, and so on. And we've got an immortal aspect, which most people don't identify with or think it's there, like a soul or whatever, but don't really give it the respect or the understanding and the importance that it plays within us. And you, of course, finished by giving a simple example of your story you shared about the two wolves from the American Indian tribe. I'll just continue on, as I say, from where we left off at that point with Krishna's teachings. And he's telling him at this stage that the only way to bring these continuous life cycles that I've just referred to an end is through self-realization or enlightenment, whichever way people like to call it. And I'm just adding in here that this is exactly what the term states. Realizing and identifying with your real self, and stop identifying with your mortal, unreal self. So there's a huge distinction there, and basically the rest of the teaching is going to keep expanding on that. So we as we get more knowledge and we make more changes according to that knowledge, we'll gradually see how we're identifying less with the illusion of who we are. And you can't just identify less and then leave a space or a vacuum. So you've got to replace it with something else. And in this case, it's going to be putting the emphasis on identifying with our real self. So it's sort of like a up and down. As one goes down, the other one automatically rises. But it's a long process. It takes many lifetimes. But this is just one lifetime that we're referring to, obviously, and the only one we can do anything about. So we're just focusing, and some people know a bit more about this than others. Others are very new to it, but everyone's got to make a start somewhere, and you just pick up wherever you can. If you've been fortunate enough, as I mentioned last week's podcast, that you've won the jackpot in life, which means you've woken up and you're starting to realise you want to make fundamental changes in your life. And I congratulated all the people last week on if they're still continuing. They've obviously made that decision, so that's very positive for them.
I think there'll be a lot of people, sorry to interrupt, Michael, but I think there'll be a lot of people breathing a sigh of relief to hear you say that it takes many lifetimes. Because even as you were speaking, I'm thinking, oh, gee, I started studying meditation in my late teenage years. I studied yoga and philosophy in my early 20s. I'm 50 now, like that's approximately 30 years of being really interested and actively reading and doing workshops and classes and pursuing this sort of understanding and growth. And there's times where I think, oh my goodness, there's times in life where I feel really connected, everything's aligned, I'm really clear. Clearly, those moments are more connected with truth. And then other moments where I'm so caught up in just the trivialness of life and the worries of the mind and things that are really so temporary, but in their moments, they're so intense, they become crippling. They actually take over, my whole life until I muddle my way through it. It's like working through murky water, and then you come out the other side and you're like, actually that wasn't really a big deal, but it kind of consumed me for quite a while. So I think this notion that in one life it can take us a long time to learn and practice, and we go up and down, as you say. But yes, reassuring to know that, when we come to understand that there are multiple lives, it makes us realize that we just slowly, gradually learn, and this path of evolution is there before us and kind of takes the pressure off. We can do our very best, but it takes the pressure off. We don't have to reach this sort of golden, glowing state, in the next year or something like that.
Yeah. No, again, you've put it very simply and very clearly and very accurately. And that's your role in these podcasts. We talked about that, to bring the listeners in on it. I tend to, sort of rattle off words like self-realization and whatever, but I'm still going through the same stage you're going through, Jacqui. And I'll mention, in today's podcast a little bit about that. Not to despair, not to worry, not to give up, because there's beautiful references that encourage us and inspire us to keep going. And I'll jump in quickly now, just simply to say that the masters tell us that no effort in the search for truth ever goes unrewarded. So whatever you achieve in this lifetime will benefit you in this lifetime, but secondly, there's two benefits from studying the great works and being interested in truth and discovering the truth of who you really are. And that is that there's instant rewards for you as you're going along in the remaining years of anyone's lives. But there's the bonus that if you have to accept this notion of wheels of birth and death, that you incarnate time after time, with the idea or understanding that planet Earth is like a school. Just like you go through primary school and high school and university and so on. Well, we have lifetimes where we gradually just start, and then we build on it next lifetime, and we build on it more the next lifetime. So it's a win-win situation, listeners. Whichever way you look at it, short-term or long-term, you're a winner. The only ones, unfortunately, who aren't winners are ones who still haven't woken up, but they're winners in their own journey, where doing what they're doing is part of their journey before they get to a stage in the lifetime when they wake up. And there'll be more explanation on that as to why some are here and why some are there. It's not willy-nilly or fluke or accident or good luck or bad luck. There's a process, there's a method behind it all. It's called the divine plan, Jacqui. But I just wanted to quickly touch on one point you said when you were talking about that, you think you're going great one day and then the next day it all becomes a mess, goes belly up, as we usually say. And you're saying it's like a yo-yo, like a seesaw. Yeah, it's what I mentioned. Life's up and downs. It's called we even call it the roller coaster of life. One minute we're up here, we're top of the world, next minute crash landing. But you mentioned like you feel like you're in murky waters. And I'd just like to expand on that for 30 seconds. In this great teaching, especially the teaching of Krishna's in the Eastern teaching, the Gita and the Upanishads, that reference to murky waters is known as, is called officially as the Sea of Maya. In Sanskrit word Maya means illusion. So basically most people are drowning in the sea of Maya, the sea of their own illusion that they've created for themselves. And what we're doing with this teaching is, if I can continue that analogy, Jacqui, is, I'm throwing out on behalf of Krishna a lifeline or one of those round circles that you can grab if you're off the end of the pier. Someone throws you one and keeps you afloat. So it's the truth that will eventually remove you from that sea of Maya. Then you go in, it's not even in today's material, but you've got me started, but it's all beautiful. I'm inspired after yesterday's comments and stuff like that. As we gradually move out of the murkiness of the Sea of Maya, we go into the stiller, calmer waters of what's called the ocean of Satchitananda. And those three Sanskrit words mean truth, consciousness, and bliss. So we take ourselves out of the sea of Maya, the ocean of Maya, the world of illusion of untruths, total falsities, but we believe them all to be true. That's why we stay there. But eventually we realize there's something amiss. And so we don't know, we don't use these words, but this is, I'm just explaining to the listeners, this is the process that's happening in these podcasts and in these teachings. And it wouldn't matter if you're studying Buddhist teachings or Jesus's teachings or anything. They're all great masters and they're all telling you the same thing. So we're transferring into this ocean, this place of truth, consciousness, and bliss. And it's a lovely place to be in, like you described how lovely it is when you're in that zone. Well, we get glimpses of that along the way, which encourages. And it's like anything. If you like chocolates or you like a drink or something, if you like it too much, you want more. Well, in this case, it can become an addiction in our worldly life. But in this case, no one can overdose on spirituality. So avail yourself of it, listeners, as much as you can, as quickly as you can, from wherever you can. And these podcasts hopefully will be of some help to you.
Beautiful. I think we do well when we ad lib, but I'm going to let you get back to your notes and your plan.
We'll be saying next week, oh, sorry, listeners, we've got fourth podcast to finish chapter 2. No, we'll be right. But I'd like to leave that this sort of part of it before we move on to another little section with a beautiful quote from the Upanishad, Jacqui. So remember, the Upanishads are similar to the Gita. They're part of the Vedic teaching, so it's all the same knowledge. They interact and interrelate. But this little passage equates perfectly with this aspect of life and death cycles, that we come and go and come and go. And this identification with the Sea of Maya, or the Sea of Truth, the ocean of tranquility. So the Upanishads refer to this very strongly and clearly, stating, "O foolish person, cease to identify with this bundle of flesh, bone, skin, hair, and excrement. Identify instead with the Absolute, and thus attain to everlasting peace." So it's potent, isn't it, Jacqui? Words, it might seem a bit strange, but it's simply saying these bodies that everyone's seeing, or those who are seeing it, or all the bodies you see around the world, you're a foolish person if you continue to identify with them. And we all go through that. There's, just some stage, even in our ordinary lives, we realise, hey, I'm being silly here. I'm this is silly, this is nonsense, and we pull ourselves up when we stop. Well, this is on a big scale, Jacqui, to realise eventually clearly that stop. You're still going to be that person. You're going to still have the body and everything, the mind and all that, but you're going to have it under control of a higher authority, and I'll touch on that later on. And if you do that, that's identifying with the absolute. That means self-realisation. You will attain to everlasting peace. The peace and happiness that everyone's seen, you can get increase it in your life day by day, or minute by minute even. But ultimately, it's with the self-realisation that you get the totality of it. Okay, Jacqui?
It sounds appealing. I'm sure people are interested.
That's what I like to hear people say. That's I've written in here somewhere. Does this appeal to you? So you've already touched in on that. So so getting back to I hadn't quite finished that page. So because of this erroneous identification with our mortal or lower self, we tend to fear death. Like people fear death, Jacqui. They might say they don't, but when push comes to shove, we all very much fear it, because we think that when we die, that's the end of us. Well, Krishna tells us that that's not true. We think that there's just one life. We're born, we live, and then we die. So, goodbye, finito, that's all, right? And that's why we fear death. We think we're going to cease to exist. But Krishna is teaching us that this is not true. It's not true. He says your body dies, and we all understand that, yeah? And either get buried or you get cremated, so it's dust to dust or ashes to ashes. And all the 5 elements from the body return back to the 5 elements in the creation, water, heat, and so on. So he says our personality, our nature, continues on in our future life cycles. And our soul, which is immortal, so it's never born and it never dies, the same as the consciousness or the absolute, also continues on. So there's going to be a lot more on this in coming podcasts, but I'd just like to relate to it briefly, Jacqui, and I'll hold up for those who can see, in case you can't identify it, but can you identify what that is, Jacqui?
You realise that times have moved on technologically wise too, and so now even a USB stick is getting a little bit outdated.
Yeah. So what about a memory stick?
Yeah, same. But that's okay.
I'm still just learning about this one, Jacqui.
Okay. I think most of our listeners will know what that is.
Okay. So and the people who aren't watching, that are just listening, I held up a USB stick, memory stick. In essence, what I'm trying to say on a serious note is that that's a computer program. On there is stuff that people have downloaded, haven't they? Music or podcasts or whatever it might be. So in that diagram, I held up a couple of times now, Jacqui, in this one here. This middle part here is what's called our subtle being. That's where the emotions are, the mind and the ego and the buddhi, the higher self, and the body down here and the senses bring information in. So this part here is where we're continuously operating from that USB stick, computer, chip, whatever you want to call it. But that's what transfers across from embodiment to embodiment. And all the change. So when we're born in this embodiment, that program is playing out. It's called your fate or your destiny. You can't alter it, but what you can alter significantly and need to alter if you want to make changes, otherwise you'll get the same stuff next lifetime, is how you respond to what plays out in this lifetime, positively or negatively, gets put on correspondingly onto a new program that's you're manufacturing for the next lifetime. And that's why it's very important in this work that people eventually, if they haven't already accepted it, accept the idea of life cycles, and because karma goes with that, your karmic life cycles. And they're all based on desire. It's all based on desires. So there'll be a lot of work on desires during these podcasts as well. So Jacqui, I just wanted to bring that in. And as I say, don't be too concerned, anyone. if you're fair income on your journey, you'll stick with it, and it'll unfold, as I keep saying, and become clearer as we go along. There's only so much we can do in each podcast, and this is only our 6th one, Jacqui. So we've got 34 more to go. So that should give people hope that there'll be more information coming. Yes. All right, so I'll press on. So what's causing Arjuna, and that's us, of course, so much angst at this point in his life is the lack of true knowledge as to who he is and what life's all about, what the purpose of life is. It's like a tug of war within him, and this is what you were describing before, Jacqui, the yo-yo effect. A constant yo-yo of mind and emotions, a clash or a struggle between two diametrically opposed forces, your higher self and your lower self. The duality of the body versus the soul, nature versus spirit. It's the warring elements of his dual nature, the egoic mind, emotions, the lower self, versus the buddhi, intuition, the third eye, with the higher self. So there's all different words you can use for either of those, and that's why I keep adding them in at this early stage. So until this internal battle taking place within us all is finally won, the constant struggle will continue to obstruct our divine union. So while we're in this yo-yo stage in a number of lifetimes, it'll stop us achieving that end point. But eventually the ups and downs become what's called a state of equilibrium, a state of equanimity, and we travel along in a smoother sort of fashion. We eliminate those highs and lows. Early stages, people say, oh, I'm happy to eliminate all the lows, but I don't want to eliminate all the highs. Well, it doesn't work that way, folks. They've both got to go. You can't have one without the other, so best to get, the only way you can do it then is get rid of both of them. And that'll all be, it's easier than it sounds. So now, Jacqui, the emphasis in Krishna's teaching switches to new knowledge that Krishna has been imparting to knowledge. So in this new knowledge that Krishna's been imparting, he now refers to that he needs to perform a duty, his duty as a human being. Yeah, duty, and I've written that in bold letters. And I expand on that by saying, this may be quite a new and profound consideration for many of you. The concept that one has actually a duty to fulfill in this lifetime. It's a bit of an unknown concept, especially in the Western world, Jacqui. People just don't understand that. But they'll eventually need to understand it, and we're looking at that right now. This is good Krishna teaching. And this is what more detailed, if you like, and simple explanation of what that means. So your duty in this lifetime that you need to fulfill, that Krishna is urging Arjuna to fight, is the rightful or truthful control of his kingdom. Remember when we spoke about the battle on the battlefield, that they were fighting for a literal kingdom, a palace and all of that. But we also, I made it very clear, the reference was more importantly for our kingdom. So that chart I just held up, the body, the mind, emotions, that's our kingdom. And we've got two potential rulers, Jacqui, the buddhi or the ego. And that's what causes the ups and downs. We've got to minimize the power of ego and strengthen the power of buddhi. That's our higher self. And so he says, that's the kingdom, right? To control the kingdom in a rightful and truthful manner. Now, I'm sure if I could ask the question and hear the answers, every listener would say, yes, I want a truthful and rightful ruler for my kingdom, wouldn't they, Jacqui? Yeah,
I believe so.
That? Yes. Yeah. So, you know, this is it. You've got to look at it from your own perspective. Is that what I want? Is that what I'm aiming for? Well, if you're obviously listening, so that is. And this is just making it clearer. So the kingdom that that we're all fighting for, our duty is to do that, is for the body, the senses, the mind, the emotions, the ego, and our soul. It's a complete totality of who we are, both natures. We've got to bring them both into unity and into control in a truthful and real manner. What we're doing at the moment is we're zigzagging in and out Sometimes we're in there, we don't know why, but we feel good. Other times we're not in there and we don't know why either, but we don't feel too good. Murky waters, like you described it. So that's what's being said here. So listeners, this is in a nutshell what all this teaching is about, to help every individual understand who they are and what they've got to do in life, the purpose of life, because there is a purpose. In the Western world, we've been fed this lie, Jacqui, especially the last 20 years or so, 30 years, that you can be anything you want. The family is the most important thing. You know, friendships and being nice and being good. They're not, it's all good stuff to have and all good stuff to do, but that's not your main purpose in life. Your main purpose in life is what Krishna is saying here. But that's not to say you can't have any of the other stuff that I've just mentioned. Yeah. We're living in this world. We're both mortal and immortal. So you need to look after the mortal aspect, but we look after that too much, is what I'm saying, in an untruthful and non-realistic way. And that causes us ultimately a lot of grief. The saying is, the road to heaven's paved with gold, or good intentions. But what we think are good intentions are actually not so good, and you can prove it to yourself. So when we start using the truth to bring about these changes, well, it all starts making big changes in our lives. So I'll just go on to say now that remember that Krishna is speaking to Arjuna as the general leading his army in this epic battle at Kurukshetra, but symbolically he's referring to us and our battle within. So I really described that in a lot of detail there in those last few minutes. So counselling Arjuna's dilemma over his conflicting duties, Krishna reminds him, your duty as a member of the warrior class to fight a righteous war trumps any obligations you may feel toward other members of your family or the government or the nation you live in or the whole world. You've got a greater duty to perform than any of those duties. So at this point of chapter 2, Jacqui, I'd just like to recap for the listeners' benefit, like a little bit of revision, if you like. And I can't remember now because we had a technical hiccup there when we froze. But what time are we supposed to be finishing so I can keep an eye on the?
We've got about 10 to 15 minutes remaining. So finishing.
Okay. Yep.
Finishing by 11ish.
Yep. So far in chapter 2, we've covered. I've written down 5 points. Arjuna overcoming his despondency and unwillingness to fight the battle before him. So that's like most of us, we're just determined we're going to keep going the way we're going. Then he regains his courage and comes to his senses and turns to Krishna and asks for new knowledge and about truthful living. And this is what I'm saying, that all the listeners have made that decision, and it was one of their exercises. If they could understand they were at a crossroad in life or somehow felt they wanted to make some serious changes, well, this is where Arjuna was. And he begins to understand the difference between his mortal and immortal nature. That's what we've been talking about last podcast and again this and now. Krishna then explains to him that it's his duty to fight for his higher self, regain his rightful status. That's what I've just spent a good 5 minutes on. And which now leads us to the next phase of the teaching, described as the philosophy of action or karma yoga, selfless action. So this is just a snippet of the next podcast. The next chapter we're looking at, chapter 3, Jacqui, is on karma yoga. Karma meaning action. So it's the union of action or using action to unite with the ultimate source, God or the absolute. So over the next 15 verses, and obviously I'm not going to have too much time to expand on those, but the whole chapter's sort of as I keep saying, just a quick overview of what's coming ahead. So over the next 15 verses, Krishna focuses on teaching Arjuna about karma yoga, literally union with God through action, which is guided by one's higher intellect, which I use the word buddhi, and it is in the teaching, rather than by emotional or mental impulses. So if you look at those times when you're referring, Jacqui, that you found yourself in the murky waters, if you look at it closely, it'll be because there was an overuse of emotional or mental agitation there. And that applies for everyone, of course.
And I think many will relate. It's like being consumed. You're consumed by a certain state of being. And it's often when there is way too much activity in the mind and the emotions are incredibly heightened in one way or another.
Well, you're touching again on an enormous area of people's lives. And, I'm just referring now mainly to Western life. But in Western life, look at what happens when that happens, what the outcome is when that happens in excess, what you're talking about and what we're saying here. Too much mental and emotional activity that's out of control because it's under control of ego, not your rightful ruler. It leads to depression, and it leads ultimately, in severe cases, to suicide. But a lot of people don't feel good about life. No one likes me and I don't want to go anywhere. And, you lose interest in life. The spark of life goes out. Other people turn to alcohol or drugs or whatever to sort of hide that pain. Gambling addictions, all of these sorts of things. Others immerse themselves fully in their work situation. So people find try to use mechanisms that suits them to overcome these issues, but that's never going to solve it. The only thing that will solve it is some understanding of truth and operating them from a truthful aspect of ruling your kingdom.
It's beautiful. I can't help but think that, it occurs to me that we don't even, as human beings, we don't even have to change our lives necessarily. It's like what you said earlier on, it's our response. So it's not like we have to change the life if we've got a family and a working life and a this and that. We still show up to work. We still show up to our daily duties and responsibilities, but it's the way in which we go about it. So when we feel those times of heightened emotion and feel like we might be making a big life decision based on that, which often is to get away from pain and move toward pleasure, that type of thing, that sometimes we can just remind ourselves, and as we're learning new knowledge, applying that, reminding ourselves that there are better ways perhaps to make decisions or to be responsive. I know we're going to touch on this more and more, but it comes to my mind, and I'm sure it comes to the mind of listeners as they're listening to this now.
Again, beautifully put, Jacqui, very clearly. And, you use that people language that I think I've sort of forgotten over the years because I sort of use more, well, I guess the language of the masters or whatever. But no, that's beautifully put. So I'll just go on to say a little bit more here because this is an important passage. He explains clearly the enormous power our desires, they're called vasanas in the Sanskrit language. So if you're reading the Gita, you'll come across that word probably and be explained anyway. But so I'll just simply call it our English word, desires. The enormous power these desires have over our lives, and I mentioned that earlier on, didn't I? And certainly in the next chapter, I'll be mentioning it, referring to it very, very strongly and clearly. That these have on our everyday lives, how they keep us in a state of bondage. A man is a slave, a victim, a captive of his desires. Only the right path of action, which exhausts all these desires, will liberate you from your self-inflicted bondage, he tells Arjuna. I'm going to read that again, Jacqui, and especially the reference to your self-inflicted bondage. That's that USB stick I was talking about, that computer program. We've programmed ourselves, and that's what's keeping us in what's called bondage, whereas we're seeking, in essence, liberation, freedom, and you only can be liberated through truth. This is Krishna's words to Arjuna in regard doing your duty and the dangers of desires in our everyday lives. So he says, a man is a slave, a victim, a captive of his desires. Only the right path of action, which exhausts all these desires, will liberate you from your self-inflicted bondage. Okay? Now, we're going to expand on it, but I just wanted to make that very clear to our listeners. Tendency for everyone is, as soon as there's a problem in life, it's my husband's or wife's fault. It's my children. It's the teachers. It's the government. It's whoever. We keep blaming, people at work, the boss, always blaming everyone else. Now, sometimes, of course, those things are relevant. But in the essence, it doesn't matter who or where you are. You've still got to be ultimately responsible for your own responses and your own way of living, Jacqui.
And we seek things, don't we? We seek things like people, we just think, if I could just have this, I'll be happy. When I get the nice car, when I get the nice house, when I get the new wardrobe, when I get this, when I get that, that will bring happiness. I mean, that's something we spend a lot of time in our family talking about, because I won't for one moment give the impression that I've mastered this at all. I dance this dance like many of you. But we live in quite a wealthy area, Bayside area of Melbourne, and our children are exposed to a lot of very wealthy families that have incredibly big homes and luxurious cars, and they go to Europe, a few times a year, and all these different things. And they often have that longing look in their eye when they're telling me about it. And I often will say, I mean, some of these people I know up close, others I see at a distance, but I often say to the kids, but do they look really happy to you? Sometimes I see people driving the most expensive cars down the street and they just look utterly miserable. Now, who's to say in that moment? I don't know that person, and maybe they're just having a bad moment, but it doesn't look like that, $300,000 car in that moment is bringing them a lot of joy at a really deep level. So I don't mean to sound judgmental there, but I think these are just things that we look around in life and we realize some people have incredible fortune, or what appears to be incredible fortune, but actually they don't really look all the happier for it.
Yeah. Well, I'll just quickly add on there that, again, whether you have a $300,000 car or don't, doesn't really mean anything. If a person, for example, has been successful in their business or something, they've employed lots of people that have provided wages, for them, and helped them pay their mortgages and that. It's not the simplest way to sum up what you're describing and what I'm sort of trying to answer is that there's a simple line that says what I'm wanting to say and move on. That there's nothing wrong with our possessions as long as they don't end up possessing us. So a lot of people identify with their possessions, their expensive house or their expensive car or their prestigious occupation, and see that as a reflection of, see how powerful I am, how wealthy I am, and all of this. Well, this is all part of the false identification. But you can have a person that's a multimillionaire or billionaire that can be interested in the truth. And they have all of those because that's all part of their lifestyle and their business and what they're involved in. So it's, as I say, it's not the item itself, but the items, by and large, when you're in a state of ignorance and don't understand, they'll end up possessing you. This is what Krishna was saying: keep you in bondage because of your desires. Yeah. So it's not material things. We all need material things, but it's how you get them and how you use them and how you see them as a reflection of who you are. And that just takes a little while to get the hang of. So I'll mindful that we're moving on, Jacqui. I'll just quickly relate because he's talking a lot about action in these 15 verses that I referred to. So I'll just read out 5 lines that will cover it pretty well. Krishna says to Arjuna, all human activities fall broadly under 3 categories. So all of our actions we're talking about. He says, firstly, action performed with selfish, egocentric desires. Well, I think everyone can understand pretty quickly that they're not really good actions. But a lot of people perform a lot of actions for that. And just a quick example might be, so we're coming up for election soon. A lot of politicians will be, not all, but many will be promising you and, whatever, that they're going to act on your behalf and they're going to do this. You're all hearing this and stuff's on the news and everywhere. But behind it all is an egocentric idea that says, all I really want to do is win my seat. so I can have this nice job and have some prestige and get a good wage. They don't really have the interest of Australia and other people. And people might say, oh, I'm being a bit harsh there, but you look at it closely. But anyway, that's just one example that came quickly to mind because of current things. The next lot of actions are performed with unselfish desires. And you think, well, that sounds all right. But what the point is that we're trying to eliminate desires. And some of those, an example of those unselfish desires, Jacqui, is people who try and save everyone. Yeah, they've got the best desire. Oh, I want to help so-and-so. I want to help my children. I want to help here. I do voluntary work. Now, all of those things are okay. I'm not saying stop doing voluntary work or helping your children, but there's a motive behind that. I'll be appreciated more. People will like me more. All of these sorts of things. So it's subtle, I know, but it'll eventually have to be looked at pretty closely. And then there's the third lot of action, which is what I'm sort of alluding to, and Krishna is saying, is how we need to perform actions. So neither with selfish desires nor unselfish desires, we need to perform them without any desires. Like I was saying before, Jacqui, no highs, no lows, because you could say good desires are good up here and bad desires or selfish desires are down here. But the listeners might understand these days, many people are reading books like The Power of Now, being in the moment, these sorts of concepts. Well, if you truly understand what that means, there you'd be performing or saying anything that has got no desires behind it. So in truth, you're meeting the need. You haven't got any mental or emotional involvement in it. You're just wanting to operate from truth. And when we understand that and accept it and do it, we'll actually find that that's the greatest help and advice and whatever we can be to our husbands or wives or children or friends or people in the workforce or wherever it might be. Jacqui, we're getting close. I'll just finish with one quote from the Upanishads. So the Upanishads state in relation to all of this, to free oneself from the jaws of death, this is what we're talking about, how to come out of this bondage that Krishna was talking about. So the Upanishads state, to free oneself from the jaws of death is very difficult. The spiritual journey is long and perilous, like walking on a razor edge. But struggle on, do not despair. Awake, arise, and stop not till the goal is reached, realization. So all of what we've been talking about, and I know some of it sounded probably a bit gloomy there towards the end, but it's there in everyone's life. We can't avoid it, or walk around eggshells. We're not going to get anywhere doing that. It has to be brought to our attention. We have to recognise it clearly, and we have to show a lot of courage and determination to overcome these sorts of illusions that are there, these falsities that are in our lives, so we can lead a more productive and happier life operating from truth. You can't be doing two things at the one time. If you're not operating from truth, you're in the murky waters you referred to, Jacqui. And if you're operating from truth, you've moved out into calmer waters, the sea of none. Now, there were the last part of chapter 2 talks about 20 verses, and I won't have time to go through them now, Jacqui, but just for the benefit of the listeners, he gives Arjuna a quick brief indication of what's to come. He makes reference about joy of the self. He talks about suffering just in a few little verses. He talks about equilibrium and equanimity that I touched on before. He talks about the five senses, how important they are to shut that down. And I'll just share a quick example with how the Indians illustrate that. And they talk about a tortoise. And so it's got its forelegs out and its neck and head out. And if the boys in the village come and want to hit it with a stick and that, which they a lot of do, kids do those sorts of things. Well, as soon as there's danger, the tortoise pulls in its forelegs and its head. So they're the five senses. We'll come to understand that they lead into the mind and emotions. So it's like prevention's better than cure. So then the more we can sort of be wary of everything we see out there that glitters is gold, and often it turns out to be fool's gold. Everyone understands that sort of analogy. So we sort of shut it down at the gateways. Buddha talks very strongly and clearly about shutting down the 5 gateways. He talks about desires, happiness, being awake, 2 types of beings, those who have woken up, which is all our listeners, and those who haven't, might be some of the ones who started but realised that really wasn't for them, and so they've dropped off, or others who haven't even had anything to do with us but still haven't woken up and are on their journey. And now the only thing I wanted to do, Jacqui, was finish off with an exercise. But either before I do that, or you, have you got something you want to add there, and then I'll give the exercise? Or
No, I think that's a beautiful wrapping up point. A lot of lovely content there today, I think, for people to think about. So yeah, roll on with the exercise.
Hang on to your seats, folk, because this is only a taste of what's coming now. We've sort of set the scene and a bit of an insight in chapter 2. But from now on, each chapter gets pretty solid.
There's no real gradual way to ease into a text like this, is there? Like I was just thinking today, we're really discussing incredibly heavy, big topics. So some of the listeners have been journeying in this world for quite a while and it's not so new, but I'm really conscious that there's a significant part of our audience that these concepts like karma and reincarnation in particular, they are huge. It's huge for people to wrap their heads around. So yeah, kind of sorry, not sorry. Like you jump in. There's no other way in a book like this.
Everyone's got to start somewhere, Jacqui.
Yes.
And if you're new to it, congratulations. Stick with it. I'll guarantee you, because I'm honest. You can see by the look of me, I'm an honest man. I wouldn't tell you a lie. But you won't ever regret 1 second of listening to any of these podcasts. Yeah.
Well, one more thing, I know time is of the essence here and I know you've got to do this, but I just think if this is reassuring to anyone that's sitting listening thinking, I don't know about this, these concepts are a bit big. When I first went to yoga training school, I had to sit through philosophy classes. Now I'd grown up, my mum and dad had not turned spiritual yet, or we just grew up a very normal, ordinary life. I hadn't grown up with religion. I hadn't grown up with exposure to any spiritual or ancient wisdom teachings at all. And then I arrive at yoga school, and as part of my studies each week, I have to turn up to philosophy classes, and they launch into similarly, not through study of the Bhagavad Gita, but, they're certainly introducing concepts like reincarnation, karma, and all of these things. And I would just sit there for quite many months, I have to confess, not really too sure about it at all. In fact, probably more strongly opposed than that. But it was part of my studies. And they used to say to us, you don't have to believe this, but if you are going to be a trained, authentic yoga teacher, you need to understand it. So that if somebody asks you about the rules of karma or, how reincarnation works, you don't necessarily have to believe it, but you have to be able to explain it to them. And so like a good, dutiful student, I absorbed the knowledge. But somewhere along the line, and there's the bigger story really than what I can relay here. Somewhere along the line, everything just started to really sink in and make a lot of sense. But that didn't happen instantaneously. It took many months and that journey continued evolving. So if you're sort of sitting there thinking, oh, I don't know about this, like just hang in there, learn it as a concept, and you don't have to agree. You don't have to be declaring that, this is now your new belief system. Just start to learn the rules of it, start to learn the thinking behind it, and just study it as an area of curiosity for now, and then just see what happens in time. All right, I will be quiet. Over to you, Michael, for the final word and the exercise and the closing for this week.
Okay, but what you just said, Jacqui, is again spot on. And I urge the listeners to heed Jacqui's words there. That's why courage is extremely important on the spiritual journey, because the ego wants to deter you. It doesn't want you doing this, and it's going to throw up everything it can at you to stop listening to these podcasts, stop reading any of these sorts of works or books or whatever. Now, it's you said it's how deep it all is. Well, I said at the opening podcast that the Gita is probably the greatest teaching to humans. There's nothing higher. So it's got to have in there, to make it that label, it's got to be full of potency and full of truth. But I'm really going to try, I'm trying to ease everyone into it as gently as I can, as softly and as gently and as kindly, because I am a gentle, kind person, despite what some people might say. But the fact remains, Jacqui, that I've got to be brutal with the truth.
Of course.
It's either true or untrue, and I wouldn't be doing my job, my duty, in my role as a teacher, if I wasn't presenting a clear and truthful teaching, which is what I'm trying to do.
100%. And in no way was that being referred to you. It's just the acknowledgement of the text itself, as you say. It's a chunky piece of work.
Yeah, I was just wanting to add more onto it.
Yes, yeah, good.
Another layer of mayonnaise, as we say. And my closing line was going to be, and you've already referred to it, urge everyone again, or remind everyone at the end of this chapter, listen openly and practice frequently. All right, but that's not that's just for every week. The exercise I'd like to leave the listeners with this week, Jacqui, to finish off chapter 3, is builds on the previous 2 lots of exercises. So we've had 3 podcasts now. So I've already given a podcast in the early stages of an exercise in the early part of chapter 2. Then I gave an exercise in the second podcast on the middle part, if you like, of chapter 2. And now I'm bringing the 2 exercises together. So just to refresh everyone's mind, in the first one, I asked you to look at, see if you were at a crossroads or wanted to make some fundamental changes in your lives. And you all told me when we came back the next week and I asked, I could hear through the screen, you're all screaming out, yes, I do, I do, I do. Oh, it's a bit of an ABBA song or something, isn't it? And then some people think I don't know ABBA songs, and in the other, say, I know ABBA songs. And I know Tay-Tay, Taylor Swift. I've heard of her. And then in the second podcast, I asked you to ponder on your dual nature. We'd been talking about that. Can you recognize that you got a higher and lower self? And I asked you, if you did have some understanding of that already, to observe which one you're operating, where were you speaking from, your high nature or your low nature? Where were you acting from, your high nature or your low nature? Well, this week's podcast is very, very simple. Not podcast, I should say, exercise. So having made some quite profound decisions so far, it's important to acknowledge or to recognize what you've achieved. So this is now our 6th podcast. I'm asking you to sit back and reflect and acknowledge that you've put in an effort so far. You made some fundamental decisions. And then observe if there's a feeling within you of gratitude. Because as we go along on this journey, Jacqui, and we start operating more and more from the truth, we realise and we'll come to see somewhere along the line, there's an increase in us of gratitude. We have a greater gratitude for our own lifetime. We have a greater gratitude for other people in our lifetime, including our family and friends and the immediate circle, but all of humanity. And we have gratitude for the entire creation, our planet Earth and all of the systems that are around. And we can, through that gratitude, we come to understand what a powerful force it is behind all of this, called the absolute. All right. So you're all part of that, listeners. So just chill out for a little bit and bask in your own glory without getting too egoic, but recognise that you've made a big effort to get this far and that you're wanting to continue on. So that's a huge decision, and be grateful for the fact that everyone's got the opportunity, but that you've availed yourself of that opportunity, and that's going to grow and give you enormous rewards along the way. All right, Jacqui, I'm done.
Beautiful.
We've gone well and truly.
We've gone well and truly, so we're just going to be over and out. Farewell, everybody. We will see you next week. Bye for now.
Bye.